Okay, so again, hi everyone. My name is Katie. I'm the co-founder and co-director of Asylum Connect. Today's webinar topic is the future of LGBTQ rights. So basically, it's going to be talking a bit about the LGBT movement as well as Asylum Connect in general and how it kind of hopes to play into that in the future. If anyone has any burning questions, feel free to ask me now. But otherwise, take a look at the agenda. So I do have quite a bit of slides for today, just because we don't have a guest speaker. Usually we do have a guest speaker, but not today. Today it's just me, so lucky everyone. But again, it's supposed to be a discussion, so I'll ask questions throughout, and then if you have any thoughts on anything I say, feel free to chime in. But this is just kind of an outlook on the agenda. So I want to start with talking a bit about LGBTQ rights in the United States. So just giving a brief overlook of the population in the U.S. and then kind of something that I see in being a big part of the future of the LGBT movement, a look at how they define gender and redefining gender, and then a quick look at global LGBTQ rights. Where is marriage equality legal around the world? Where is it illegal to be gay? Then Asylum Connect, just briefly, and then there's going to be some time for any remaining questions or thoughts because I'm not going to be able to cover everything, unfortunately. So we're going to just start with LGBTQ rights in the United States. So these are just some statistics that I got for the LGBTQ population in the United States. It's kind of a hard population to define because obviously it's a lot of self-reporting and not everyone feels comfortable. But as of July 2015, I found a statistic, as you can see the first bullet point. So they found that 1.6% of adults identify as gay or lesbian, and only 0.7% is bisexual. So as you can see, it's a pretty small percentage of the overall population. In the US, it was a big deal with marriage equality last year, coming in on June 26, 2015. But there's been, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, social media, a lot of recent backlash. A lot of people attribute it to marriage equality. Actually, so an estimated 100, over 100 anti-LGBTQ bills are pending across 22 states. So those are bills such as what people are calling the bathroom bills for transgender people. And those bills are highly controversial and are being passed in states such as Mississippi and Indiana were two really big ones. Another kind of big problem with the US is that the percentage of homeless LGBTQ youth is very high. About 40% of them currently identify as LGBTQ, according to the True Colors Fund. Does anyone have any reactions or thoughts about this slide? I know I went through it kind of fast, but no? Okay. Well, if you think of anything, feel free to chime in. But if not, I'll keep going. So there's been an overall positive, I think, shift in public opinion in the U.S. So it's interesting, LGBT Americans actually indicate the West. So think California, San Francisco, obviously, as the region with the most social acceptance of people who are LGBT. So in 2013, which is actually quite a while ago, 51% said that there was an acceptance in their Western city or town, which is very good. And then I think there's been a huge shift just over the past decade. So as you can see, it said in 2001, Americans actually opposed same-sex marriage by a margin of 57% to 35%. But then since then, it's steadily grown. Again, we actually got marriage equality last year. And then based on polling in 2016, a majority of Americans, at 55%, actually do say that they support same-sex marriage. So while there are definitely a lot of problems that we will go into, for example, the homeless LGBT youth, there has been, I think, a radical shift in public opinion in favor of at least accepting things such as marriage equality. Does anyone have any thoughts on marriage equality or this shift in public opinion? Do you agree? Are you surprised? Julene, any thoughts?
I think what we can do is just give it 30 seconds for everyone to just read it through. And if anyone has any comments or questions, they can share it then.
Okay. So just wait right now?
Yeah. I know the silence can be uncomfortable, but it's good for people.
Yeah, I can't see people. Okay.
I kind of have a question about
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abby.
Hi.
So the first bullet point talking about the West as the region with the most social acceptance, I guess coming from the East, being born here and just being here geographically right now, is there just a less acceptance, or would you say that it's more of like an outright not approving of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually kind of surprised when I read that statistic myself. I'm pretty sure that they're probably talking about places such as like LA, San Francisco, which are just so heavily LGBT friendly. But if you look at the East Coast, I know like the major cities, I think, tend to be basically anywhere geographically tend to be accepting, at least in my view. From what I've heard from other people, it's usually more of like the rural small towns that you have trouble. So think like rural Indiana, maybe don't have as much diversity, but places like, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York City, all on the East Coast, I think are very friendly. So I think it's more of a rural urban kind of divide, and just the diversity you get, the just being exposed to different types of people. And then also just a generational thing as well. I don't have it up here, I probably should, but I think younger Americans if you look at the polls, they are increasingly in favor, no matter where they are. So,
okay,
that answers your question, but yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions before we go to the next slide? No. I hear someone. Do you guys have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to ask you a question. So can you hear me?
Buzzing. Do you want to try to write it in the group chat? I can see the group chat now. It might be easier. Sorry about that.
It suddenly worked, I think.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you kind of now.
I was trying to, okay, I'm going to write it.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so do you think that the acceptance of LGBTQ people or groups is kind of pretty split between Democrats and Republicans, or do you feel like they're also kind of the middle?
That's a good question. I don't get myself in trouble here. But I mean, honestly, I don't think it's split down the middle. Let me be fair. I think, again, age is a big part of it. I think even if you look at young Republicans, I think you have hopefully a good chance of acceptance, but I would definitely say stereotypically Democrats are, more liberal. If you just look at the policies that Republican people try to or are in favor of putting into practice, a lot of it is unfortunately kind of anti-LGBTQ if you do look at the fine print. So I would say Democrats are more leaning towards inclusivity in terms of legal rights, at least. So maybe I'm not going to say Republicans are all anti-LGBT, but some of the legislation that they proposed in the past have been anti-LGBT for conservative values. So, but again, I can't speak for all Republicans.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Does anyone else have any other questions on this slide? If not, I'll go to the next slide, but those are two very good questions, so thank you. So what now in the US? So again, that was a very, very quick overview. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said, but I really kind of wanted to focus on what I think is going to happen in the future. So even the acronym LGBTQ is new. So when I was growing up, I never heard like LGBTQ. A lot of the times it's just LGB, and you just stop after the B. So I emphasize TQ because those are the newest letters that I think over the years are going to be have a lot of progress to go and are more up and coming terms. So one example that I like to use is the Huffington Post. So I don't know if you guys are all familiar with the Huffington Post, but it's a major media publication. So they used to be called Gay Voices, and they changed their title to Queer Voices. So I write for the Huffington Post, and I woke up and it was called Queer Voices now. And so I was, very surprised, and I thought that that's like a very interesting change of being a major media publication. It's a big deal that they changed that one word. So I thought that was really interesting and really indicative of where the movement is going. So I kind of wanted to look at why they did that, because to me it was very interesting. So a big part of it is people in the LGBTQ movement are trying to reclaim the word queer in the US. So traditionally it had very negative connotations, but a lot of people are now saying that it's the most inclusive word. It's more inclusive than, just saying gay. They're talking about how it's an empowering word to speak to and about the community. And then as you can read the bullet points, I'm just going to paraphrase it here. But they're referencing how much progress has been made since the Huffington Post launch of Gay Voices in 2011. So they reference here marriage equality. To Laverne Cox, who's a very famous transgender actress, actually had the cover of Time magazine, to then Miley Cyrus actually coming out as pansexual. So there's all these changes, and now people are kind of saying, what do we call this movement? And a lot of people are in favor of queer. Also, a big thing with queer is that it's supposed to have a real emphasis on intersectionality. Queer is not just about including like gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people, but also including more marginalized populations. So you can think of that as racially marginalized or economically marginalized. So it's just basically the argument to me, as I understand it, is that it's more inclusive, it's reclaiming this word, just more people can be encompassed under this word. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't know if you know about this. So my school, I go to Holy Cross in Worcester.
Okay.
They just had a new thing that they started this past year, I believe. And it was for the housing system at my school.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you identify as queer, you're able to house with who you identify with. So if you identify as a girl, you can live with girls, and that's how it works. I was wondering if you knew anything about that on other campuses, because I was personally really surprised that my campus incorporated it, because we're a Catholic school. So it's
yeah. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. That surprised me. I'm familiar with Holy Cross, and I know it's Catholic. I went to school, I'm from Rhode Island, so I know some people at Holy Cross. But no, that's really cool. I'm trying to think if I've heard that. I haven't looked at Penn's housing. I went to University of Pennsylvania. I haven't looked at their housing policies just because I was living off campus, so I had no reason to. But I think I have heard of people being able to do that at their schools. I think it's more of a growing trend, hopefully, that I think will be more in the future. Also, as I mentioned previously, the bathroom debate of, if you identify a certain way, should you be able to use this bathroom is another huge question that I think also has a lot to do with housing. But yeah, that surprises me, just being a Catholic school. I think that's great though. Yeah, that pleases me. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Does anyone else have any other questions about queer? I do have a definition coming up. I realize now I probably should have put that first, but that might be helpful at this time. So I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, yeah. So the Huffington Post, this is how they define queer, and I really like this definition, so that's why I put up here its own little slide. But it says queer functions as an umbrella term that includes not only lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender people of LGBT, but also those whose identities fall in between, outside of, or stretch beyond those categories, including genderqueer people, intersex people, asexual people, pansexual people, polyamorous people, and those questioning their sexuality or gender, to name just a few. So again, it's like this emphasis on inclusivity. Just being LGBT, people are saying, is not even enough. You need to actually include all of this. And so this kind of leads into my argument that now the LGBT movement is not just focused on sexual orientation, but there's been a huge push, at least in the US, about gender identity. And so kind of queer, but also gender fluid, all these new terms have been kind of evolving. And I know from just this year, I think it's gotten a lot of attention. I know that personally, I had never heard of some of these terms, and I'm like actually in the acronym. So I think it's great that they're starting to get more publicity. Huge celebrities like Ruby Rose, and even transgender people like Laverne Cox have been doing great things for visibility. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that. So again, kind of shifting gears from sexual orientation to gender. So gender in the LGBT community, I call it redefining gender, and we'll go into a little bit why. But before that, does anyone have any kind of final thoughts on, or lingering thoughts on the sexual orientation, or what we just talked about? I know I went kind of fast before we talk a little bit more about gender.
I actually have a quick question. So
Yeah.
was there any visible resistance to reclaiming queer from
yeah.
the queer
yes.
community, and if so, what was the reasoning behind that?
Oh yeah, no, there's tons. Obviously, I think this is a type of huge decision that I think I brought the Huffington Post, because when they did that, the pieces that they actually published pieces on the Huffington Post going against that and being very, very angry that they changed the word from gay to queer. I think the rationale behind that is that just not everyone, queer is a very strong word, and some people, some people want to try to reclaim it. Other people are they have very kind of sensitive, they've heard it in the past, they don't want to hear it again. They've maybe been called in a negative sense growing up, so they don't want to be associated with this word and be called themselves queer. Sometimes it can also, I think for other people I've heard some people saying that has more gender connotations. So if you're just gay, maybe you don't feel queer if you're a cisgender gay person. For me, I can speak from personal experience. When the Huffington Post changed it from gay voices to queer voices, I wasn't against it, but I definitely had a moment of, now I get to change that on my, gets to refer to me. I think I'm probably in favor of it just because it is more inclusive. But again, I think the argument is just not believing that you can successfully reclaim the word, and not wanting to kind of think about how it was used in the past and not wanting to be associated with it. Does that make sense, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, but now we're going to talk a little bit more about gender, and that kind of is, to me, would fall under the queer definition. So big questions. Julie knows I had presented at a different webinar. So I think it was the Gender and Equality Joint webinar, and I kind of gave a little bit of this. So I'm sorry if anyone tuned in twice, but I'll try to make it a little bit different. So there's big questions in society, such as who's a man, who's a woman, and then who gets to decide this. So I think this is a very interesting question. So gender and binary society. So this is what a man and a woman might look like in gender binary society. Obviously not everyone is David Beckham, but I think most people would call him a man. And then this is a family and gender binary society. So just the point here is that there's 2 children, and then a wife and a husband, mother and a father. So just briefly, a gender and binary society. So it's basically the classification of sex and gender into 2 distinct, opposite, and disconnected forms of masculine and feminine. So it's basically the social boundary. I'm just reading out the slide now. That discourages people, that's important, discourages people from crossing or mixing gender roles, or from identifying with 3 or more forms of gender expression. Also, under the binary model, I think one of the most destructive things about the model is that people assume that sex, gender, and sexuality are assumed by default to align. So obviously this is not always true for a lot of people, which we're starting to see with more celebrities actually coming out with differing identities. So this classification does not always encompass individuals who are born with non-binary reproductive organs, and may actually exclude those who identify as LGBTQ. Does anyone have any questions about the binary society? I know it's a lot of terminology that not everyone's familiar with, but basically just think of, how most people, I still would say the majority of Americans kind of identify without thinking. You're kind of just brought up in it, how you think of a man and a woman. That's kind of how I understood it.
I have a question. Sorry.
Funny feedback, that's okay.
So I do a lot of LGBTQ work also, definitely not on your level, which is like fantastic. But I've never heard the term third gender, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I'll go a little bit into that. I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, third gender. I think that's kind of more, it's probably talking about terms such as like gender fluid, and I see genderqueer right next to it. I've never heard of it either. I think that's just something that person decided to call that, probably encompass, they were like genderqueer and then kind of ran out of words. But right now I'll go into a little bit more, but I think people are coming forth more and more with differing terms. So people are kind of starting not to just try to define themselves within a certain term. If they feel that the specific term doesn't define them, then they're willing to like go create their own term, which I think is a very cool movement and definitely very, very controversial. And where kind of the LGBTQ movement, I think, has gotten a lot of blowback so far from people that just don't understand that point of view. But yeah, that's a good question. I can get you like a more thorough answer after this, but I'd have to do some research.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So just a little bit about gender and the LGBTQ community. So again, we just talked about binary and now gender more in the LGBTQ community. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. I have a fun quote. So sometimes the bravest act is just the courage to be ourselves. So I just take this quote because again, of what I'm saying is more and more people are actually having the courage to come forth and say maybe controversial things that people don't fully understand. Well, I think it's great. So that's from Where Love is Illegal. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a very successful campaign that's basically devoted to shedding awareness on LGBT rights globally. I definitely encourage you guys to check them out. So distinguishing between sex and gender. So these two things are actually different. So sex refers to biological and psychological characteristics. It refers to basically male or female. Gender, on the other hand, actually does refer to behaviors, roles, expectations, and activities in society. So it's more cultural learned significance of sex. So it's masculine or feminine. So LGBTQ movement focuses on gender identity. So we're going to start with transgender people. So transgender people are people whose gender identity differs from the sex assigned to them at birth. A very famous transgender person right now, again, is Laverne Cox. I think she's on, Orange is the New Black. It's a great TV show. A lot of people are familiar with her work there. But she's done an incredible amount of good things for the transgender community in terms of visibility and advocacy work. As she says, it's more than just our bodies. The transgender community is definitely getting a disproportionate share of feedback or criticisms right now in the U.S. movement with, again, the bathroom bills. I think in terms of the acronym, when you look at LGBTQ, the T is definitely the least accepted nationally. People just, for some reason, just can't seem to accept transgender people. But Laverne Cox, I really like how she says, it's more than just our bodies. Their argument is, I obviously can't speak for transgender people. I'm not transgender, but their argument usually is the same as, someone with sexual orientation. Like, I was born this way, I can't change it, which I think is a powerful thing to keep in mind. Then you also have a more controversial figure, Caitlyn Jenner. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her. So she said, I'm saying goodbye to people's perceptions of me and who I am, but I'm not saying goodbye to me. This has always been me. Again, I think that's really powerful, the way she put that. As you can see, she's on the cover right there of Vanity Fair. She's gotten a lot of heat just for people saying that She's not a good representation of the transgender community in the US because usually they're very economically marginalized. So she's actually had some, been able to afford more kind of surgeries to make her look a certain way that a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have the money for. But I put this up here because of the part where she said, "I'm not saying goodbye to me." She's always felt this way. She hasn't been able to express it. So again, just transgender people, it's not always safe in the US to be a transgender person. So this is a really striking statistic to me. It was taken from Time magazine in 2015. So it says transgender people are 4 times more likely than the general population to report living in extreme poverty. Nearly 80% of transgender people report experiencing harassment in school when they were young. So, I mean, again, I think a takeaway here is that it's still very, very difficult to identify as transgender and be accepted into the U.S. society. So just another quote from Time. While images of Caitlyn Jenner received a standing ovation and accepting an award in a Versace dress might seem to herald a sunny time for transgender Americans, most of them are still greatly disadvantaged socially and economically. I think that is definitely something important to keep in mind. Does anyone have any thoughts on Caitlyn Jenner?
I just have a question. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
About this economic disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
I guess where does that kind of originate? Is it because, if you know this might be kind of too big of a question, but do you know if it originates from the lack of acceptance into the systems of education and jobs, or if it stems from somewhere else?
Yeah, so I think it's systematic. I think it's a lot to do with a lot of people's families don't accept them. You saw the statistic: 40% of homeless LGBT are homeless youth identified as LGBT. So I think a lot of times transgender people are, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of documentaries, are disinherited by their parents. Kicked out of the house. They're young. They don't have anywhere to go. Transgender, if you're doing surgeries, that can be very expensive. It can take a lot of money, and then also employment is a huge issue for transgender people. A lot of the times, transgender people won't get jobs or will actually get fired if their employer or their prospective employer does find out that they're transgender. The reason for this is, probably again, cultural, social acceptance. People just aren't willing to hire them if you don't have a job. How do you get housing? Then people end up homeless with no real means to support themselves. If that makes sense. So I think that it's systematic and that needs to be addressed socially so that they have economic opportunities.
Thank you very much. It's really
Thank you. That's a great question. Does anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay. Well, it's a very interesting topic. So if you think of any other questions, feel free to stop me. But I'll keep going.
I have a question.
Okay. Hi.
You talked about transgender people undergoing surgery a lot of the time. Is that a large part of the transgender population? They feel like they want to get surgery? Do most of them do that?
So that's a good question. I don't have a statistic on how much a percentage actually do get surgeries. I do know that that's definitely not everyone's choice. Some people, feel uncomfortable enough with themselves that, if they just dress a certain way or, be able to call themselves a certain thing, that's enough for them. I think it's a very personal decision whether or not to actually undergo the surgery. So even if I had a statistic, I'd probably say it varies on the person. But yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so just a bit of a summary slide on what I think transgender people in the U.S., the state right now. So the main point is that despite Caitlyn Jenner, despite Laverne Cox and all their successes, and despite all the progress that has been made, I think it still really remains dangerous for transgender people in the United States, unfortunately. So 2016, we're in 2016 right now, has actually been called the most dangerous year for transgender Americans. I think that's very striking. I think a lot of people see marriage equality and they're like, oh, the LGBTQ movement is done, enough is done. But then, you see that statistic and you see all the other statistics, and I think there's so much more work to be done. And then there's kind of this idea of marriage equality in the US as actually being a catalyst to ramp up discrimination against the transgender community. So people on the other side are actually using that as an excuse that, the LGBT movement is out of control, and they're actually using that to kind of attack, unfortunately, the T in the acronym. I've definitely seen most attacks are being targeted towards the transgender community as opposed to the gay community or the lesbian community or the bisexual community. So a question that I had before is just, how can we reduce conflict and promote peace to make it safer for transgender Americans? That's definitely not an easy question, and not one that I have, a full answer to. My thoughts on that would just be, again, like raising awareness, social acceptance. I think from my kind of small advocacy work, I would say that a lot of the times how you can break through to these people is just having in-person presentations, putting a face on the issue, hearing someone's story as a fellow human being, I think can be really effective, which is why I keep harping on like Laverne Cox, because she's, an example of a human being. It's a lot harder to, say that she doesn't deserve rights if you're looking at another person. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that question or the transgender community in the United States?
I have a comment, not so much a question, but
oh yeah, go for it.
Bullet point. I mean, this is speculation, but I'm guessing that part of the reason why it's become more dangerous is because the community has more visibility now, which is a good thing. And that's just like, what are ways to make it safe for people to come out. You can't just tell people to, just be yourself and everything will be better. Like clearly.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I don't know if you know of any organizations that like work in that area specifically. But
I mean, yeah. I mean, like Julian, I can send you a list of organizations people are interested in looking into it further. But there's definitely some organizations. I think, thank you for mentioning the visibility. I think, again, visibility is a huge problem. I think that's definitely one of the reasons why the transgender community is being targeted. Yeah. Because unfortunately, a lot of times people can't walk down the street. Like maybe I can walk down the street and no one knows I identify in that acronym, but if a transgender person, sometimes they walk down the street, people are getting assaulted all the time because, they don't look or act a certain way that other people think they should. Mm-hmm. But yeah, visibility, that's a great point. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? Yep, go ahead. Yep.
So I think that like visibility for like gay people and lesbian people, when celebrities did come out as gay, like it prompted like more social acceptance. But why do you think it's different for transgender people?
That's a good question. I think, again, it's just newer. I think it's that like celebrities coming out has been happening for like really happening for like several years at least. This transgender movement kind of just exploded in 2015 to me. Like that's really when like you were seeing like some of the first like really prominent people. So I think that it's just kind of in an earlier stage of development. And I think that all the time, like you're going to get blowback, like unfortunately in an early stage social movement. So I think it's just, again, I think they're kind of way behind for whatever reason. So it's more new to people, and people tend to, unfortunately, just have a hard time accepting something that they haven't seen before. I guess fully understand. But that's a great question. I'd actually love to hear if anyone else had any other thoughts on that question. That's a good question. A hard question. A good question. I'll give you guys like 10 seconds to see if you guys have thoughts, and then we'll move on.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know how to phrase this question, and I honestly don't know that much about it, but it's something I'm curious about, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, go for it.
Anyone specific in who's like publicly condemned being gay, lesbian, transgender, but has themselves been identified as that? So someone maybe like in the Republican Party who's really against it, but then like them, I don't know if that exists or if that's something that.
Oh no, it definitely exists, unfortunately. There's yeah. I'm blanking on names, but yeah, I mean, I don't. I probably wouldn't say names anyway, but there's definitely been quite a few like political scandals where people are very, very advocate for anti-LGBTQ legislation. You know, very like just very aggressive, and then like very homophobic, and then it's like a scandal because you find that they were on Grindr, you know, like the gay male app, or like they had a boyfriend, or they were cheating with their wife with a guy. Like it's all, so unfortunately, like that is actually a thing that sometimes, like very homophobic people sometimes actually do identify as that.
Has that been coming up in media like a lot, like public figures or?
I mean, like I've definitely read about it before. I think honestly, when I read about it, it doesn't really surprise me anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, like the media definitely likes to run those stories. I don't think maybe it's gotten as much attention as it deserves, because I do definitely think that that's really interesting and kind of kills their argument a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. But yeah, definitely. Like if you were to Google that, you would find people 100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, guys, before we move to gender identity? A little bit different. No. Okay, so this is kind of the next section I was going to go over. So breaking through the binary. So this is not transgender now, like transgender people, being born a man, now identifying as a woman. This is actually people who think of gender as a more fluid spectrum. So this would be like where the third gender, whoever mentioned that, this would fall under that. So non-binary, so no longer just man or woman. And so I put some celebrities here because, again, I think that we can all agree celebrities definitely increase visibility. So on the left, we have Jaden Smith, and then Miley Cyrus and Ruby Rose, all very famous people. So challenging traditional notions of gender. So these are the two terms that, again, there are a lot of terms, but these are the two terms that I think have gained a lot of visibility just within this past year. These are two terms that like I wasn't familiar with until this past year, but the celebrities have done a great job of familiarizing people with them. So the first is genderqueer. So this is a person who does not subscribe to conventional gender distinctions, but identifies with neither, both, or some combination of male and female genders. Gender fluid, on the other hand, is a little bit different. So it's a gender identity, which refers to a gender which actually varies over time. So a gender fluid person may at any time identify as male, they may identify as female, or like any other non-binary identity really, or some combination. So an example is Jaden Smith. So he's, Will Smith's son. I don't know if you guys know him. But as you can see, he's wearing a skirt right there. But he's a 16-year-old rapper and actor. He's really famous because, again, he's Will Smith's son. And I put this quote here. It says, "Broke the internet with repeated appearances in skirts and dresses," because when I read that, I was just like, why should that break the internet? Like, why do people care so much if Jaden Smith wants to wear like a skirt or a dress? I think, to me, like that's never really made sense. I think, he's not hurting anyone if he wears a skirt or a dress, and it really shouldn't have the power to break the internet. So to me, that was like very like disturbing. Like it's amusing, but it's disturbing. Does anyone have any thoughts about that quote or kind of movement towards the challenging traditional notion of gender and it being more of a spectrum? Do you guys know people who identify this way? Are you familiar with them? Like in person, at your schools? No?
I'll reappear.
Hi.
I did a lot of theater, which shouldn't be a qualifier, but I feel like people are more open to at least being honest with their identities in that community. So I encountered a lot of people that did not adhere to the binary.
Awesome.
Ways.
Yeah. Very cool. Did you find it helpful to understand it when you like met people that identified that way?
It definitely made the situation more approachable, just because for the longest time I felt like I couldn't talk about it just because I didn't have anyone that was involved in my life in that way. And it definitely makes me more cognizant of I get it's not like it shouldn't be scary or unapproachable. It's
No.
very part of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in my experience, I definitely think that the people that are comfortable talking about it have like a family member, a friend, or something like that, that identifies that way, and suddenly, it just becomes, oh, my sister, my brother, identify that way, and they're still the same person. But yeah, I mean, like gender queer, gender fluid, again, it's not maybe as visible as the other things. And I think, at least in my experience, when I talk about these terms is when people kind of, get scared and like draw back, and because it's more new. It's like the trend, like I highlighted the T and the Q because it's more new. And they're writhing towards acceptance, but it's definitely not all there yet. So now I just took some quotes from the famous celebrities that I had. So again, Ruby Rose on Orange is the New Black, like, became so famous after that show. So she says, or they say, for the most part, I definitely don't identify as any gender. I'm not a guy. I don't really feel like a woman, but obviously I was born one. So I think, again, like if you want to understand these identities, you should talk to the people who actually identify with them and see what they say about it. Miley Cyrus. So Miley Cyrus, again, was a huge deal because, as Hannah Montana, a lot of people just kind of assumed she was a straight cisgender woman, and definitely not now. So Miley says, I don't relate to being boy or girl, and I don't have to have my partner relate to boy or girl. So here it's not just a comment on gender, it's also a comment on sexual orientation. Again, I think it's just important to recognize that those things don't align. That's probably the biggest, or one of the biggest problems with the binary, is just assuming that if you identify as a woman and you like men, it's a problem. So again, just the point of that was that there are many different combinations of gender identity and sexual orientation. For instance, Miley Cyrus identifies as both gender fluid and pansexual. So that's a combination that if I said that to someone 3 years ago, they would be like, what? Like, no. So I think that's just kind of it's great that she's done that. Miley has been a really good force for good. She started a charity in LA to help homeless LGBT youth, and now has kind of given a little bit of visibility to two terms that people just would not know like 2 or 3 years ago. So I would say that's pretty positive. And then again, Ruby Rose. I'm a fan of Ruby Rose, obviously. But Ruby says, the takeaway is that only you know who you were born to be, and you need to be free to be that person. And I put that there because I think that increasingly that is kind of the mantra of the US LGBTQ movement, that only you know who you are, and that it's a basic human right to be able to be that person. So that's why I put that there. Okay. Does anyone have any, before we kind of move to a very, very brief summary of the global LGBT rights, does anyone have any lingering thoughts or, something I missed, something that you don't agree with about the LGBT movement in the United States? That was a very quick synopsis, but.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm doing this volunteer thing for the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking, and so we assist victims, and we have to be aware of LGBTQ and how to better help and understand them. And so we were going over pronouns and how to refer to them, and one of the ones that I didn't know was they.
Yeah.
And so it's not he or she, it's they. I just wanted to know if you would talk a little bit about pronouns and how to refer to people.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I don't know if you noticed, but when I was saying, I was talking about celebrities and I said she, and I was like, oh no, they, because I saw myself doing it. Yeah, pronouns is definitely really, really important. That's becoming increasingly important, I think. So what she just was saying was that a lot of people that don't identify, as male or female, that identify as genderqueer or gender fluid actually would prefer to be not have male or female pronouns be used, so like not he or her, but actually they. So like plural pronouns to be used because those don't identify with a gender. So it's kind of like I don't think there's one way to like go about asking people. There's like an increasing movement in the LGBT, or like thought process in the LGBT movement that you should be asking everyone what pronouns they prefer. But sometimes I guess the bad part about that and the unfortunate part about that is that if you ask like someone that identifies, like I can't really imagine like asking one of my friends that identifies as a cisgender straight female, like, oh, what pronouns do you want to be referred to? Sometimes, unfortunately, that would offend people outside of the LGBTQ movement because they'd be confused by it. But so it's kind of, but then like the problem with that is that then the people that do identify outside of the spectrum then have to go out of their way to tell you that they want to be called they pronouns. And that can often be a very difficult conversation. So it is very important to give people the opportunity to change their pronouns. I don't have I'd have to give some thought to that before I made any suggestions on how to do that. I guess my only thought there would be that if you thought that this person, or if you knew that this person identified outside the binary, I would definitely ask them, oh, like what pronouns would you like to be referred to as? And then also just be cognizant of maybe, you know, how they refer to themselves. I think that can really be telling. Sometimes people will just put in conversation and then just take note of it and say, oh, like this person prefers the they pronouns. Does that kind of answer your question? That's a really good question.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, but definitely pronouns. Thank you for bringing that up. Does anyone else have any other lingering thoughts on the U.S. LGBTQ movement?
I actually just have like a quick like response, or not response, but
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. Something that I've noticed happening on my campus is in any situation where you know, a group of people are meeting for the first time, or like you're at an orientation, it's become kind of the norm in a lot of these settings. So like, along with introducing your name, you just introduce like what pronouns you use as well. So
Really?
I think just gradually making it like an expected thing. Every time you meet a bunch of new people, I think might be.
That's great. Yeah.
To go about it. Yeah.
And you go to Tufts, right, Julian?
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah.
I was thinking. Yeah. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
Well, unless like it's an LGBT meeting. That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in terms of like how do you want it to like be accepted? Ideally, I would definitely say that would be ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Is just having everyone do that, because that really gives people like the opportunity. I think one of the hardest things about maybe identifying within the LGBTQ movement is just when to come out to people, you know, when to tell people your gender identity. It might not be the first thing that you want to say to someone you just met. So I think that, yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I was not aware of that. Does anyone else have that at their schools?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say something about pronouns also. So just when in April there was a conference at Hampshire. I'm not really sure, in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Okay.
It's and actually when we filled out name tags, we had to put our preferred pronouns right underneath. And there's actually, so there was he, she, they, and then there was Ed.
Okay. Yeah.
And I guess that's that term is also used for, would that be used for gender fluid individuals also? Or I was just wondering, because I didn't have like the confidence to ask anybody.
Oh yeah.
Because I didn't want to like ask too many questions or anything. So I was just wondering, you know, exactly like what.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that. I feel like it's gender fluid, but after this, I can definitely look it up for you and like send you. I don't want to say anything that's wrong. Me talking about this part of the LGBTQ community is like very interesting because I don't personally identify within, you know, the T or the Q. So when I talk about this, I try to be very like, sensitive to that issue because I can only speak so much, just not being my personal experience. But yeah, I believe it's gender fluid. I believe that's correct. But I don't want to tell you anything that's that's wrong.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks. Does anyone else have any other thoughts about pronouns before we move on? Or any of what I just said?
It seems sort of objectifying. It seems sort of dehumanizing when you refer to a person as it. It's a bit confusing to me, but I guess it's a personal choice too.
It's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not it.
Well, why ID? How would you use that?
They is the one that's most common in terms of like what I've seen, definitely, and the not behind the they,
How would you use it?
like they are. It's a little bit confusing to people who've never heard it before because they often think it's like referring to multiple people. But you would just use it as you would just talking about two people. So they are doing something would be how you would use it. Because it doesn't have a gender connotation is why people are choosing it. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
How do you use the ID then?
It would just be used in the same way as that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, that's the other problem is that it can be quite confusing and that if people don't feel comfortable enough to ask, how to use it, then it can be, how will it gain mainstream if people don't understand how to use it? So I definitely, whenever anyone asks me questions, I definitely encourage you guys to ask people that actually do use these pronouns questions. I mean, obviously try to do it in a sensitive way, but hopefully usually people, if you do it in like a tactful way, they'll be able or willing to try to answer your question and try to help you understand. At least that's been my personal experience. But yeah, those were all great questions. If anyone thinks of any other questions, then feel free. We can always return to US. Yeah. Okay. Eunice, yeah.
Why can't they just stick with their name? Like when we refer to them? Like why is they necessary? Is there like a situation where we can't use their name?
I think it's probably just because anyone doesn't use their name all the time. I think it's also like if you don't say that you don't want to be called like by if Ruby Rose didn't ever said that she didn't want to be called to her, people would just call her like they wouldn't. There'd just be an inevitable instance where someone was like she. I think that's probably why. And so for people that identify outside of the binary, that can actually be a little bit, I think, kind of a sensitive issue and even like a little bit traumatic if you're trying to not identify the gender and you're being consistently referred to as she by other people. It can kind of undercut your identity. So I think that just in terms of being comfortable with yourself, they just don't want to hear themselves being called that way. So that's, I think, where the they comes from because of the inevitable instance where someone's going to use a pronoun to describe them. But that's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. I mean, when in doubt, yeah. I mean, that's also an interesting point. Cause, like, when in doubt, like if you don't know someone's pronoun and you don't feel comfortable asking, I think when in doubt, use their name. Like that's good. And then you can figure it out, But yeah, I mean, I think pronouns is definitely up and coming. Hopefully it's going to take on more. Do you guys hear that echo? Is that just terrifying? I don't know how to fix that. Julian, do you know how to fix it?
No, I'm gonna try to mute some people, but that's
Okay.
absolutely terrifying.
I felt like a monster. I was like, Jesus.
Okay, I think it's gone. I did nothing, but
You fixed it, Julian. You did all the credit.
Kathleen, it does sound like one of those voice transformers.
Yeah, I know. I was like, Jesus, it'll scare everyone. Okay, well, we've already spent like an hour on this, so I'm gonna keep going. So now it's gonna shift more to global LGBTQ rights. You'll notice when I go over the global LGBT rights that I definitely have more content with the LGBT rights movement in the US. That's because I live in the US and that's just, what I know. And also globally, it's just really, really hard to address the entire global landscape. Obviously, there's so many different countries. It differs from country to country, but we're going to go over just kind of a really broad overview. And then I would encourage anyone who is from abroad to chime in here. That's what I was kind of counting on, and just let us know how it is in your country. So as you can read on this slide, that was a U.S. movement. So obviously, while there are problems in the U.S., like it's unsafe for transgender people, obviously it's not perfect with all the anti-LGBTQ laws trying to be passed right now in response to marriage equality. It is better than many parts of the world. So in many parts of the world, having the wrong gender expression and or sexual orientation, it does remain fundamentally unsafe. So this is going to be a little bit about global LGBTQ rights. So this, I don't know if you guys can see this, a little bit small, but I'm going to show you guys two maps because I don't have time to dive into like the intricacies of each country, unfortunately. I would love to, but I can't. So this is, a lot of people do measure, I also want to comment, like a lot of people do measure like progress by marriage equality. That's a very controversial measurement. Not all people think that way, but I've just decided in the efforts of time to show you guys where same-sex marriage is legal. So this is just a map. As you can see, the red is 20 countries where same-sex marriage is now legal. This is updated in 2016 by the Human Rights Campaign, so I'd say this is pretty accurate. So as you can see, the left side of the world is like all red. There's obviously a huge discrepancy here. I think, when you see this map, like there's like Africa, what's going on, like, like all of the right side. It's pretty startling. And then this is just, this is a map, and then this is just from the Pew Research Center, and it's just, I wanted to give you guys a little bit more of like the names of the actual countries where marriage is legal, but also the dates, because I think that's interesting. So if you want to look at the dates, so you can see the United States on the right, 2015. So it's actually one of the latest countries, which everyone, is very interested in. You have other European countries that got marriage equality pretty late. So you have Greenland, Finland, Ireland, all 2015. Then you have one of the newest, Colombia, 2016. I'm trying to look for the earliest one. The earliest one seems to be Belgium, 2003. And then it also says countries where gay marriage is legal in some jurisdictions. So there's Mexico right there. Does anyone have any thoughts on the map? Yep. You're gonna say something? Any thoughts? No. Okay. If no one has thoughts on the map, I will keep going. Okay, so that was marriage equality, but obviously there's still tons of people living in countries where it's illegal to be gay. This is a slide that whenever I present on Asylum Connect, I put up this slide. So this statistic is 2.79 billion people still live in countries where being gay can lead to imprisonment or death. And I put this slide up here because these are two people that live in Russia, and they were actually beaten for being gay in a protest for their rights, a peaceful protest where police actually beat them. So this is the other map from the Human Rights Campaign, updated in 2016. This is where criminalization around the world, where is it illegal to be gay? So let's just go back for a second. So again, this is the map where it's, marriage equality is allowed in the world. This is the map where it's illegal. I mean, I think we can all agree, this looks very different. The left side is definitely, if you want to generalize, the left side is definitely where in the world you want to be if you're gay or identify as different gender identity. The right side, the orange, is where it's illegal. So according to the Human Rights Campaign, there's at least 73 countries where it's illegal to be gay. The black is actually where it's punishable with the death penalty. So right now, as you can see, it's actually punishable by death still in 10 countries. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to see, but I can send Julian these links if you guys want to look at it further. But I think, yeah, so Africa is a very difficult place, obviously, still. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Either where it's legal versus where it's very dangerous? I want to give you guys 20 seconds to think about it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just in looking at the spread of where it is, do you find that it's more common simply because of the fact that there's probably stronger ties to just a general sense of religiosity in these countries?
That's interesting. I think that has a big part of it. I think it's like cultural, even if it's just not religious, like just very ingrained stereotypes. For whatever reason, like it's just very, I don't know if it's only religion, but I definitely think religion probably does play a part in it. But I don't have a great answer to that question. But that's a really good question. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that question? The role of religiosity and why it's illegal to be gay in places like Africa?
I do. Sorry. Okay. So there's this great documentary that actually really helps, will really help me understand the criminalization in Uganda.
Okay.
It's called Kwame Kuchu, and I guess I can link it in the chat. But if it's a documentary that follows the anti-LGBTQ bill that was being passed, and it's a great documentary. The way it's set up is it really explains, it follows a lot of the activists, and it really explains why it's like this, where it stems from, how the culture perpetrates it, and everything. Yeah, so if you want to learn more specifically about where it's from, I would definitely say watch that documentary.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely going to put that link in the chat. That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with it's very cultural. That's what I've heard. It's hard, when you talk about global LGBT rights, because I do think each country is different. So I don't like to speak too much to that, I think. But the people I've talked to, it's unimaginable, the cultural divide when you hear it from the Western perspective. So does anyone else have any thoughts?
I have a question. So with the U.S. recently bringing marriage equality, do you think that has sparked or possibly will spark migration to the U.S. as, I guess, your whole project of asylum seekers?
Yeah.
Do you think that a main reason for seeking asylum is because of their status in that acronym, or do you think it's they're coming for other reasons but also need resources because they do identify as LGBTQ?
So Asylum Connect, there's different types of asylum seekers. You can seek asylums for religious reasons, political persecution. Asylum Connect helps people that are specifically leaving for persecution based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So yeah, these people are coming just because it's very, very dangerous to be gay or identify as a gender. So that's the primary reason. I think why they're coming to the U.S. Is because even though, the U.S. has tons of problems when we look at it, it is just so much better than where these other people are. So yeah, I think, that would be the answer. Do you have a follow-up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a suggestion. Or that's all.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I have someone else's. Yeah, you want to try now?
Hello.
Hey.
Yes. My name is Olive Morsone.
Yeah.
I am in Africa, so I want to speak about the situation, the current situation in Africa. Is it my turn to talk?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, right. Yes. So I am in Kenya now, but my point here is we still have cultural challenges. So it's so hard. This is still a long journey to go because nobody can accept. If I go to the society, I say that I am, for example, a lesbian. Jesus, I swear to God, even my family will just kick me out of the house and I will not be accepted. So many gay and lesbian people live in hide. They can't come out and speak, I am this and this. For example, in Uganda, it's just, even the president himself said we don't accept this officially in Uganda. When they see you, they know that you are one, they kill you with stones. They in my country, in Rwanda, where I came from, when you say you are lesbian or gay, they will just, nobody will speak to you. They will just leave you. They will just say this one is evil. They will call you devil officially, and nobody wants to be associated with evil, like with someone who is evil. So I wanted to ask you guys, what can be the solution that we can put pressure on the African governments to allow people to be who they are, to allow people to be, if I am gay, I am a gay, if I am a lesbian, I'm a lesbian. I believe that human right, every human, even every human being has a right to be who she is. So, and another issue is that, so when you speak to people, you say, oh, for example, I'm a lesbian and I can't speak it. They will say, oh, look for asylum in USA. But my point is, how long will this happen if all people in Africa who are lesbian or gays are seeking asylum in USA or in Europe? So what will be the future? Are we not killing the future generation? Right. Because it should be something sustainable. It should be something which the future generation, people who will be born, people who are from that community will feel like they are free and they have freedom to be who they are. So my point here, my question to each one of you is that, how do you guys think that we Africans who are here in Africa, who want this to be official, accepted in our governments, what can we do? What can we do? Because I don't want to keep saying, everybody, if you are gay, go to USA, go. So we want to do something sustainable for the future generation of Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really important perspective. Just being from Africa, you want to hear from people that are actually living in the country. I think that's a really, really good point. I think a lot of the asylum seekers that come to the US are actually, they're advocates in the country. Like you said, it's very, very dangerous, and they have to come to the US because their life is in danger. But I mean, I definitely understand your concern that if you take all the LGBTQ people out of Africa, how is that movement supposed to grow in Africa? The thing that's coming to mind for me is I actually have someone I know who lives in Iraq. It's a very dangerous place to be gay. He started an organization called Iraq Queer. And it's an online website basically where people on the ground in Iraq, I think it's the first LGBT organization in Iraq. But they basically started, it's dangerous, but they started basically an online movement because it's dangerous to do it in person, where they're asking people in Iraq who identify as LGBTQ to maybe not share their full name, but to share their story. It's a little bit like where love is illegal, because they think that by humanizing the cause, that's the way to get through to people. So I think that they're, putting pressure on community members that don't agree with it, but also government by having this website where there's all these really powerful and emotional stories of what it's like to be gay, and challenging people to look at those stories and then say, oh, you're still evil. I think that, to me, has been one of the most effective strategies I've heard of, where you're living in a country and it's just so dangerous, because we don't want to put, obviously, anyone's life in danger, but then how do you do that? So I think that technology is going to play a pivotal role. And I can definitely give Julian the link to that organization, because I think maybe it'd be really interesting for you to look at Iraq Queer and what they've done in Iraq. That's just one suggestion. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Because that's a great question.
Yeah. When Dan Savage was asked, he's an advocate in the US, when he was asked why it's so accepted, why being gay and lesbian is relatively accepted these days in the US, he said that it's because of all the people who came out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people know their colleagues, members of family who are out, and when it's close to you, you're much more empathetic about the situation. But I understand that there's coming out is not an option for many people in parts of the world. But yeah, it will be long and difficult, and until people have friends and understand that it's not something else, it's something that.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, definitely. I would again say probably back to technology. I think I'm echoing now, but with the younger generations is that you do have the platform, like, again, like Iraq Queer and Where Love is Illegal campaign, where they actually have people put pictures, but they're living, a lot of people from Africa actually participate in the Where Love is Illegal campaign, but they put pictures of themselves and they'll like cover their face so that they can share their story. It's a very moving story, but then, you know, they don't share their full name, their identity is preserved. So that's kind of like, it's not perfect, right? Like you would love to share your, very difficult. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on this slide where it's illegal to be gay, or any of what's been said or shared so far?
I have a few comments. I agree that social media campaigns, as you said, you know, they're doing a pretty good job in being effective in raising awareness and making it more acceptable to accept everyone. But there's also, I think, so you know that, of course, there's over 190 countries that are member states of the United Nations. And I think that would possibly be one of the ways for the UN to really enforce it and make it international law to accept everyone and in their offices in every country. And because I think it's also just a lack of political will to really accept and enforce the human rights of everybody, despite of sexual orientation. So to me, I think that would be one of the possibly fastest and one of the most effective ways to do it. But I know it would be very complicated since there's, again, over 190 countries that are member states. And, you know, there's contrast with beliefs and religion and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the differences there too is that, you know, you couldn't have an international law or enforce an international policy, but just, at least in my experience, the on-the-ground social change is a different story, and it's just about, like what you said about enforcing the laws, I think would be the most difficult part. You know, coming into a country where it's very socially unacceptable and being like, even if you had a law tomorrow, I think it takes a while, unfortunately, to change people's minds. I think that, you know, the U.S. right now is a great example of that. You know, marriage equality was passed, and then you had people like Kim Davis stand up and say no, and, you know, still, even, you know, it's a law, but just not accepting it in certain parts of the country. So I definitely think that it would help, but it would be very, I would love to hear people's thoughts on how to like implement that on like a local level, or like on the ground instead of like the policy level. But yeah, that's a great point. Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any other reactions to that point? Yep, go ahead.
I would like to suggest something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you guys, you have like some community, or if you have like strong community or association, maybe we can organize something in Africa with people who already have, people who already accept this officially. Like if you know gays community, maybe we could organize like an event in Africa. We call them, we tell them, even if you are this, there's nothing wrong with being who you are. And then if we can tell them, because we have a lot of them, but even if they don't come publicly,
right.
Then we organize something, I don't know, but I think there's something we can do.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's something. It's just, you definitely want to make sure it's like safe for you, like on the people in Africa. But yeah, I mean, like I would love to hear like any brainstorms of like what you have in mind or how you can execute that on the ground. I definitely agree that, you know, having people come together and coming out publicly is like very powerful. And I think when people start to understand, you know, it's like family members, hopefully it's your sister, your brother, your daughter, you know, then hopefully it starts to get a little bit more normalized and people just realize that they're people. So it's a great point. Anyone else have any other last thoughts on the global LGBT rights movement? Again, this was very brief. It's just hard to talk about it in such a large context. But thank you so much to everyone who shared their stories. That was super helpful. And we do appreciate it. I'll give everyone like 10 seconds to think of if they have any other final thoughts, and then we're going to move on to talking a little bit more about Asylum Connect. Okay. Well, I'm gonna move on. But if anyone has any other thoughts, like please again, like feel free, just like unmute yourself and just chime in. Oh, okay. So I just had a few just pictures of the campaigns I was talking about, I guess, before we move on. So this is from Where Love is Illegal. It's just a picture. This is one of the most moving pictures I've seen. So it says, facing questions about his sexuality, Amqua, a gay man married a woman. It's a good, and this picture is very moving, but it's just really good indicator of what actually happens, right? Like you don't have the option of being who you are, so you're forced into a stereotype, which obviously can be very spiritually inhibiting and destructive.
Wow.
This is, yep, do you have a comment? Okay, so this is another Where Love is Legal shot. So again, like they're not showing the face because it's dangerous, but this is someone from Brazil. So it says, Shine's lesbian from Brazil. When she was 15, she was raped by a classmate to learn to be a proper girl. I put this up here because, again, corrective action is unfortunately, corrective action is when someone finds out you're gay and they try to make you have sex with the person that they think you should be, attracted to in order to change your sexual orientation. Obviously, that will not work. But it's a really unfortunate reality. And I think that when people hear this type of story, like it gets people very enraged, having a young 15-year-old raped legally and officially, especially a lot of the times by government officials, is very destructive. Does anyone have any thoughts on those two stories? I mean, it's a very unfortunate reality. And if you're interested in hearing more stories like that, again, like I'll send this to Jolene to send out, but the Where Love is Legal campaign, does share a lot of these stories. So if you're interested in seeing what actually happens, people.
Yeah. Okay, this last one. Shian is a lesbian from Brazil. When she was 15, she was raped by a classmate to learn to be a proper girl. That in Africa, it is a say, and it is like an obligation, if I can call it like that. It means like good girl, behave good. You have to have good manners. Good girl, don't shout. Good girl, don't, like, if you are raped, you don't have to say it. That is African culture. You have to be a good girl and behave in a certain way. If you are raped, we have so many cases of girls who are being raped, and their mothers tell them, tell them don't say it.
Yeah.
For example, when I was 4, when I was 4, I was raped by my cousin, and it was never spoken. When I grow up and I finished the university, that is when I started thinking, oh, maybe that's why I did not like men all of my life. Because when I was 3 years and a half, and my mom did not say it. And when I asked her, she said we were not. That could have been a bad image to our family, to other families. So there is this behavior, being quiet when things are going wrong, when you are being sexually abused in Africa and you are a girl. Most of them are tending to be quiet and be silent, which is so bad. I wish what I think now, I was thinking like that when I was 3 or 4, because it could have been maybe not affected me psychologically.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's terrible. And I think what you said about silence, it being a problem, is so true. Yeah, so true. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on kind of that, the silence and how to get past that? I mean, that's, yeah.
Can I ask a question again, please?
Yeah.
To Olive, yes. Olive, would it be an option to do more campaign around to focus on sexual violence rather than equal rights for gays and lesbians? Because sexual violence seems to be a big part of the problem, and especially that it's viewed as legitimate in special cases. But if you focus on that in general, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? I didn't express it.
Do you mean like doing what can be done to stop or to reduce sexual violence?
Yes, because there are certainly organizations that are trying to influence that, that try to stop that. Is that an option? How you can get engaged with the topic without having to directly confront being without having directly to confront bisexuality, lesbian,
Yeah.
and sorry.
Yeah, I think it's about like a mentorship program, empowerment program. You educate girls. For example, in Kenya, there is a Kenya Girls Guide. They go to the villages they go to those schools of poor kids, girls, and speak to girls about sexuality and speak to kids about sexuality when they are still young, which I did not have when I was young because it was not yet there. But it's not enough because it is few. Like all girls are not like all girls and boys when they are still younger. They don't get that opportunity to be told what is the reality, to be introduced, to be taught the life skills. When you are, because in African culture, like your mom will never talk to you or your father something about sex. It's an abomination. You should not say that in African culture. You can't tell your child you can't speak to your child about sex. So a few organizations are starting up something to do with the girls, educating girls and boys to educate them about sex, which is still not enough because they are few. So the solution should be like speaking to those girls and boys when they are still young and talk to them about sex, the consequences, the truth about their bodies, the building them the confidence of not being quiet. If someone abuses you, it is my right not to beat. If someone comes and touch you at your booms, you know that is wrong. So kids should not be like silent. If someone does this, I should not make noise, I should not say. So they become very self-confident when they are still young. We have to change I believe that the only way to change people is to change their mentality. So we have to find a way to talk to parents also, telling them it's okay to tell your child about sex. It's okay to let your child be who she or he is. We need like to educate programs, educating parents, not only parents, but also building a mindset in the kids when they are still young about sexual knowledge.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just going off of that, that's still a big issue in the U.S. Sexual knowledge. A lot of the times, sex ed classes, in middle school and high school are not LGBTQ inclusive. So then people don't have knowledge if they identify that way. But yeah, thank you so much for those questions, that discussion. I actually think Julene, she messaged me. I can't see the group chat, but she says that she can read aloud a couple of the questions that you guys have put in there. So Julene, do you want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah. All right. So from Zoe and Mary, they asked, are there Christian groups that try to combat the image that Christianity excludes LGBTQ people? And the second question is from France, who asks, we see that religious people are often resistant to LGBTQ rights. Do you think there's a way to reconcile religion and LGBTQ rights? So they're very, I think, tied together.
To religion. Okay. Thank you for those questions. I guess I can go first. So there's definitely ways to tie those together. I personally have friends that identify as Catholic, Republican, and gay. Some people are like, how can you identify as those three things? But, it's a misconception that you can't. Those things are not mutually exclusive. I think people in their minds just assume that they are. So one of my friends is, he's a big, he actually was part of the Asylum Connect team this past year, but he was a big advocate, and he played a big role in, I'm blanking on the organization's name, but it's like a Republican conservative organization, but it's like the LGBT wing of the Republican Party. So oftentimes those people are religiously affiliated, but they are all identify as LGBT. So yes, there are definitely organizations that exist like that, at least in my experience. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on those questions? Do you guys know of Christian groups that are LGBT inclusive? No, not so much. Yep.
Sorry. So I actually am Catholic, and that's been a big issue just in the Catholic Church that I really don't agree with. I worked at a church last summer in downtown Boston. That was a Catholic church that was very inclusive of LGBTQ people. But it's just a hard issue because I think a lot of people are really set in stone about what they believe in the Catholic Church, and they're not really open to new ideas, so that's very difficult. But I was really proud to work for a church that was inclusive, so I do think there's hope. I just think it's hard because a lot of people that are Catholic are very traditional and not very open to like accepting LGBTQ people. But I do think there's hope, especially seeing that there's some churches definitely in Boston that are inclusive. So hopefully it'll continue.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it definitely does exist. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen I think it honestly it's gotten better, and it depends on, for a lot of people, like I said, identify as LGBTQ. If you're born into a religious group, probably it varies according to your personal experience. I was raised Catholic, and I went to a Catholic boarding school, where unfortunately it was not too inclusive. So it kind of framed my view of maybe that religion, but I definitely have friends that are Catholic and are happily Catholic and happily LGBT, and don't see why those things can't be together. And I think that, to me, is the view that people should be working towards. And I definitely agree that those do exist. But I think that, I think that people need to be, I guess, more vocal. I think in terms of visibility, it'd be great to have more Catholic people that are also saying, I'm LGBT inclusive and everyone should be equal. So yeah, that's a great point. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on the role of religion? Julian, did we answer both of those questions? I don't remember what the specific questions were.
I would say pretty much, but if those who did ask the questions want further clarifications or have follow-up questions, you're welcome to share them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give you guys 15 seconds to think about if you have follow-up thoughts or questions for anyone here.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. Is it there any way association of this community in the USA can do because the countries, or there is a way we can bring together the accepted countries community to come together and write a document or something asking the UN to pressure the states in Africa to allow people to be free? So something like that.
I know, for example, it was a big deal. The United Nations recently had the first Security Council on LGBTQ rights. That was a big deal. So they were coming together for the purpose of discussing the global state of LGBTQ rights. So just beginning that discussion, I think, was very important. In terms of what we can do, I would have to think about that. I was wondering if the person who suggested the UN in the beginning, I don't remember your name, sorry, but do you have any thoughts on this?
Could you repeat that?
Do you have any?
About United Nations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that there is a way a countries who association of the community in the countries which are accepting LGBT officially. There is a way they can write and keep pressuring United Nations to pressure the countries, African states, African governments to allow people to be free, to give them their freedom, to allow us to have programs telling people about even if our culture says this, but human rights, this is a basic right of a human being. So that even you should see if the states, if the government can accept, it will be very easy for the population, the citizen to accept. So we're asking United Nations to pressure African heads of state to allow this to be in their country, to allow people to be free in their countries. I want to live in my home. I want to be home, but I have to live in Kenya, not in my country.
Yeah, no, I think that the UN could influence, have a huge impact and influence. But in general, with anything, there are so many laws in place already and programs and whatnot, and they're just not being respected because people are, they stick to their beliefs and, be it for religion or whatever. But I do think that it things can be enforced, and I know not all of the African countries are member states of the UN, but those that are, not necessarily put new programs or laws, but just enforce them, and create campaigns that are going to take place in each country or that are going to support the rights of LGBT. And, I think, well, obviously the universal human rights, they cover everything, like respect, for everyone to respect people despite sexual orientation. But those rights are violated every day, not just with just respecting people for sexual orientation, but just rights in general, for children too, rights to have a childhood and whatnot. But I do think the UN has a lot of power. It's just lack of political will that people and the UN leaders are just not, taking their roles very seriously or just ignoring because it's not part of their beliefs. But it can get better, and I also hope that everyone gets accepted, and there comes a day when people will be able to be who they are and live where they want to live.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. All very, very good questions. Does anyone have any last questions before I see that we're getting near the end? We have like 10 minutes. I was going to talk a little bit about Asylum Connect for if you guys don't know what it is. So any last minute questions? We can also take some other questions at the end because I'll try to go through it really quickly. So if not, I'm just gonna start. So Asylum Connect. So again, like we won for you guys interning and familiar with MCC. So yeah, good luck at MCC 16. It's very exciting. But so Asylum Connect won the Millennium Peace Prize at MCC 15. And so we've been working with MCN on our campaign. So this is actually our last webinar. So sad but exciting same time. But Asylum Connect was, so I co-founded it in July of 2014. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it because while the campaign is ending, the initiative certainly is not. So you can there's still time to get involved. But I co-founded it with one of my friends from Penn, going into my senior year of Penn. And we co-founded it because my friend Saeed was actually an LGBT asylum seeker himself in the US. So we took his personal experiences of coming to the United States and not knowing where to go for basic human needs resources. And we said, how can we address this gap and how can we really fill this void? What can we do? So this kind of this is how Asylum Connect was born. So we started in July 2014. And then we launched the campaign in August 2015. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about what we do, just very, very quickly. So this is a quote that I like to share. Again, I'm very big into having people that actually have experience speak for, because I'm not a former LGBT asylum seeker. So this is a quote taken from an LGBTQ asylum seeker from Russia. So he said, "I spent all my childhood, all my life in Moscow. It's not the place where you want to live if you're gay. They say you are free to beat gays, to kill gays, and people feel they have the right to do this. I was beaten by police. There's no place where you can be sure you are safe." So this is a reality for, again, the 2.79 billion people that still do live in the countries where being gay can lead to imprisonment or death. So Asylum Connect is devoted to helping people that do come to the United States due to persecution based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. This is an infographic that we have on our website, so you can go into more detail later. Estimations right now, so the US government actually doesn't track how many people actually seek asylum due to sexual orientation or gender identity. But the estimate right now is around 300,000 LGBTQ asylum seekers that live in the United States. It's an extremely vulnerable population. They often have nowhere to go. Many of them do end up homeless. They can't work. That's a huge part of it. So they can't work until they obtain a work permit, which usually takes at least like 6 months, and they never actually have the right to a government attorney. Seeking asylum is a legal process, and to have someone coming in to the country that doesn't speak English, usually it's their first language, has no real knowledge of the culture of the United States, to not have the right to a government attorney. It just makes it very, very difficult to actually receive asylum. I've talked to legal professionals that have actually said, sometimes LGBT asylum seekers, like a Russian asylum seeker has to actually represent themselves in a court of law against, another US-born trained attorney. Obviously, that does not end well for them. So again, it's just an extremely vulnerable population. These are people that are coming to the country just to be who they are. So the Asylum Connect Global Peace Campaign, so that's, again, why we're doing this webinar right now and what we collaborate with MCN for the 2015-2016 academic year. So we really had 3 primary goals. The first is the goal of our organization, so to connect LGBTQ asylum seekers in the US with basic human needs resources. The second was to raise awareness for LGBTQ asylum seekers in the United States. A lot of people are not aware of them. And then third is to, I should say, start to end or help to end global stigma surrounding the LGBTQ community. As everyone pointed out here, there's an incredible amount of stigma worldwide. And as we talked about, both in the US and globally, the movement is far from over. So this is just, I'm not going to go over all of this, but this is just Asylum Connect's major milestones, what we've done with the help of MCN and the campaign. We're, a relatively new initiative, but I think we've been able to hopefully do a lot in the past year, and we hope to do even more going forward. So just some highlights I'll go over. We released our catalog 2.0 for Seattle, Washington in February 2016. So I'm going to go over the catalog, but the catalog is our primary thing that what we do. So the catalog is the first online centralized database of service providers for LGBTQ asylum seekers in the United States. So we've been building that over the past year. We launched it for Seattle, Washington, and right now we're piloting it. So I'm going to go over that because I think that's the most important thing that we do. So again, our primary goal is to connect LGBTQ asylum seekers in the United States with service providers that have the resources, information, and knowledge to help them. So this is what we started with. So the picture on the right, as you can see, is not technologically advanced, but it was the beginning of the catalog when Saeed and I, before we had a team, before we had advisors, before we had all of our partnerships and funding and campaigns, we wanted to release something tangible on the web because this issue is time sensitive in the sense that there are LGBTQ asylum seekers right now in the United States that need help. So again, the catalog, as you can see there, is the description we use. The first online centralized database of service providers useful to LGBTQ asylum seekers in the United States. So basically what this means is if you're an asylum seeker and you don't know anyone, you arrive, say, in Seattle, and you don't know where to go for food or housing, for social support, for counseling, for internet access, to do your laundry, to shower. They don't know what resources are LGBT friendly, what is asylum friendly, meaning, they're free and accommodating and don't require IDs, because oftentimes LGBT asylum seekers don't have government issued identification. So we actually verify service providers and make sure that they meet certain criteria, active, LGBT friendly, and asylum friendly, and then we list them by category. So an asylum seeker can come onto our website, click on what type of service they need, and then have all the contact information right there and access that resource. So the catalog is piloting in Seattle, Washington. Initially, it was, as you can see, it listed medical, social, counseling, legal, and other services. So it was a very preliminary model. And then, okay, so this is it. The impact of even what you just saw there, the catalog 1.0, even being so simple as it was. So this is Tom, a 31-year-old LGBTQ asylum seeker from Jamaica. Again, not his real name, just to protect his identity. But he said, "Thank you so much. I was trying to gather information such as yours, but this is the most comprehensive I've ever read." I think to me, this is when we really noted, before we started this, we did a needs assessment and we had my co-founder's personal experience not being able to get the information he needed. But this was like really the first time, one of the first testimonials we took where I said, this could really make such a difference in a lot of people's lives. So with that, we, and with the help of everyone, we launched the Asylum Connect Catalog 2.0 in February 2016. On the right is a picture of what it looks like if you were to go on our website right now. So it features new search functions and improved visuals. As you can see, it looks a lot better than the catalog 1.0. We also also developed an updated verification system for the resources that we actually put in there to make sure that they're all safe for LGBTQ asylum seekers, that they're active, LGBTQ friendly, and asylum friendly. And so we're continuing to pilot it in Seattle, Washington. And now I'm just going to go just really quickly over some mock-ups. So what would happen if an LGBTQ asylum seeker went on our website right now to access the resource? So this is what they would find, the Catalog 2.0 landing page for Seattle, Washington. So as you can see, there's a map now. We also have more services, more sophisticated services, and additional features that we screen for. So is the resource confidential? Is it free? Are there language translations available? We also have new and improved subcategories. This is something that we did to make it even easier for the LGBTQ asylum seeker to actually find the resource that they're looking for. So for instance, the user can select mental health and support groups right now. So if they did that, they could then browse relevant support groups. So this would be all of the organizations that have support groups in the Seattle area that we have verified to be safe for use by LGBTQ asylum seekers. Then the user selects a resource to find out more information. So more information right now is just things, as you can see right there, description, population served, if it's a specific culture, if it's a specific letter of the acronym. So for instance, just bisexual people, the contact information, the website, any additional information that we've picked up from the service provider that they wanted us to let people know, or past users. Also, non-English services available. But our vision is ultimately to transform how LGBTQ asylum seekers connect with service providers in the US. So the Catalog 2.0 to us is a starting point, but we really hope to build on that. For instance, we think that we're trying to add multilingual translation capacity to the catalog right now, which would translate the catalog into different languages. It's something that we're brainstorming right now how to do that, so it'll make it easier. We're also hoping to scale to actually all major US cities. Eventually, our next city after Seattle is going to be Philadelphia. We're still in the process of piloting the catalog in Seattle, but we hope to have a case study by August. And then definitely check our website for updates on that. And then, I'm going to shamelessly, just before we run out of time, I have to shamelessly plug you can join us. So how you can join us. So right now, all of our staff positions are closed for this upcoming year, but we have something called an associate position. You can read more on our website. I won't go into detail right now, just for the sake of time, but you can see the link right there. You can sign up to translate for us on an as-needed basis. That's always extremely helpful. You can subscribe to our email list for updates, and then we do try to raise a lot of awareness for both our cause and initiative through social media. You can find us on the following sites. Definitely visit our website. It has a lot more information than I just said right now. You can like us on Facebook. We have an Instagram account as well as a Twitter account. And I can also give this to Julian after, so because I'm going quite fast. This is just also a quote, so Harvey Milk. So all young people, regardless of sexual orientation or identity, deserve a safe and supportive environment in which to achieve their full potential. To me, this really describes, the mission of Asylum Connect and organizations like Asylum Connect. And I think it really is a good summary of what everyone's been saying, that everyone deserves a safe opportunity and chance to be who they are. Oh, and this is a collage that I made. So again, we like to think of it not as an LGBTQ issue, but really as a human issue, as a basic human right to have whichever sexual orientation or gender identity you were born with. So these are actually all pictures of LGBTQ asylum seekers. The woman on the left is actually one of our advisors. So I wanted to put this together just to show you that LGBTQ asylum seekers are as diverse as anyone. And they're just people like everyone else. So join a movement for a more inclusive society. As I said before, the campaign is ending, but the organization certainly is not. So we'd love to have anyone join us or, help us raise awareness on social media. I'm always available to ask questions. That was a really quick overview. And I see we've run out of time, but if anyone has any burning questions or thoughts, this would be the time. But thank you to everyone for joining.
Thank you for leading this conversation.
Thanks. Any burning questions before we all?
And of course, everyone has each other's email addresses. So if you think of something later, don't hesitate to reach out. This is obviously an ongoing conversation. The webinar may be ending, but it doesn't just stop here. So thank you, all of you, for tuning in. I hope you got to learn something. And everyone was so reflective and forthcoming with their insight. We very much appreciate that. And we will be editing out certain parts of this webinar, so it is safe to post on YouTube. I encourage you to all share it with your colleagues and friends. And yeah, this is the last one. Oh my gosh, Katie.
Yeah, I know. So many of them.
That's incredible. Yeah. You do.
But I think
every time.
Thank you. No, you've been super helpful, Julian.
Yeah, this is a little bit sweet, but yeah, thank you again everyone for joining. Hope you all have a fabulous weekend, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good Friday.